Hello everyone. Let's start with basics of anthropology, and the first chapter is Genetics and Evolution of book Ember and Ember. Uh, in the beginning, astronomers believe that the universe has been in the existence for 13.8 billion years, and Carl Sagan, a famous astronomer, he devised a calendar in which he compared these 13.8 billion years with 365 days or a year, and using 24 days for every billion years and 1 second for every 475 years on a scale, he began the beginning of the universe or Big Bang on January 1st, the creation of Milky Way on May 1st, September 9th, that marked the beginning of our own solar system, that is around 5 billion years, and September 25, it marked the origin of life on Earth, that is 3.7 billion years. On At 10:30 on December 31st, first human-like primates appeared, that is just before Triassic period, and modern human-like beings, hominins, it has been in existence for around 2 million years, just for 90 minutes out of 12 months period. And if we talk about Homo sapiens sapiens, we are just in the last few minutes of this few couple of seconds of the whole this mega scale. And some 55 to 65 million years ago, during the uh, KT extinction event, which wiped out most of the dinosaurs from Earth and which led to the gradual evolution of mammals, because the clearance of dinosaur, it gave the mammals the required niche, the required atmosphere for uninterrupted growth. So at this time, and this was also the time when Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate and the Tethys Sea, which subducted and compressed to form modern day Himalayas and northern plain. So at this time, first primates appeared, and those were the ancestor to all living primates, include monkeys, apes, and humans. Around 35 million years ago, first monkeys and apes appeared. About 15 million years ago, that is some 20 million years ago, after the appearance of monkeys and apes, old world monkeys in the continent of Africa, the immediate ape-like ancestors of humans probably emerged. So the entity or ape-like ancestor being talked about is Australopithecus. About 4 million years ago, the first human-like beings, the hominins, they appeared, and modern humans, they evolved only about 100,000 years ago. The timeline can be gradually extended to 250,000 years ago. This is the whole timeline. And let's talk about evolution of evolution. So the earliest ideas about evolution, so since they started with the gradual emergence of civilization. So whenever anyone talks about gradual emergence of civilization, they first sh- shift their head to the Romans and the Greeks, because these were the pockets of the world at that time, around 4, 4 to 5th century BC, when modern notions of rights, justice, democracy, Senate all thus appeared, and they could be called the earliest pinnacle of civilization. So in the 4th century BC, the Greek philosopher Plato and Aristotle, they believed that animal and life form a single, a graded continuum that is going from perfection to less perfection. And you should also keep this in mind that it was in the 4th or 5th century BC. That is, it is around 2500 years old. So if you look at the situation they were in, look at the technological and education advancement of that time, it was quite radical idea. So at first you cannot believe them, you cannot imagine them to think like us or the way modern scientists think. But at least these people, these earliest philosophers, they at least tried to go against the tide. So for them, animals and plants were a single stock, and it was a graded continuum. So according to them, life was a gradual travel, a gradual continuum, so in which the other life forms, they form the lower strata. So they were like less adored or less perfect beings, and this continuum or this chain, it finally culminated at the human, which was considered the apex of all perfect species. So according to them, all the species that were present there, all the flora and fauna, plant and animal species, they were uh, going to transform themselves somewhere in the future, and this transformation is going to end at the apex species. So this chain of species, so human were top of this scale, and later Greek philosopher idea added the idea that creator gave life or radiance first to human, and this essence, this gradients, it was lost to each creation. Microbius, one of the Greek philosophers, he summarizing the thinking of Plotinus, used an image that was to persist for centuries, and it was called the chain of being. So these were the earliest attempts at making sense of the diversity of life forms. And this idea of chain of being, it persisted through the years, and it was not discussed until 18th century, because before that, the medieval time, it was a dark period of uh, obscure things. Everything was um, everything was submitted before the church. Everything was considered low before religion, and everything that every religious authority or religion in particular, they came at any such analysis, it was considered final. Whether or not it was empirical was a different matter altogether. But this period was dark in the sense that the the empirical ideas or rationality, it was thrown into dustbin, and everything that such religious authority, including their obscurantism, their rituals, their performance, their greed, whatever it was, ultimately the idea of rationality, idea of putting question, idea of seeing things in a different light other than what has been suggested by religion or church, it was considered a blasphemy, a blasphemous attack. Then, after 18th century evolutionary theory, it came into being when followed by Renaissance. People tried to look for alternate views of life. When they finally found that the church was not doing anything but fooling them, then they started looking for alternate reasons for everything. They started taking everything on a rational footing, and with it, empiricism or empirical studies also came into being, which means that everything should be put to test before accepting them as it is. And the idea that nature had an order of being, order of things, encourages studies of natural history and comparative anatomical studies. Then the blasphemous ideas, the earlier blasphemous ideas, now they became routine. So people were not shocked when the naturalists they suggested that human beings were close to apes. But it was also that this notion was consistent with the idea of chain of being, in which um, the humans stood tall on everything, and less perfect things they formed the nodes on the chain. So apes were already less perfect, and they could have formed a node which lied somewhere below the stature of humans. But then Carolus Linnaeus, he came up with the system natura, a classification of plants and animals, and he placed humans in the same order as primate as apes and monkeys. He did not suggest an evolutionary relation between apes and humans, but this systema natura, it was the first such attempt to classify various life forms. Then there came the idea which was not believed at. Everyone was everyone accepted the fixation of forms, that whichever life form we see today, whether it is a plant or animal species, it was fixed by the divine creation somewhere in the past, and whoever or whichever is existing today, it was the original form that was given to it. Then Jean Baptiste Lamarck, he came up with the theory of acquired characteristic, which was uh, in right form, it was the inheritance of acquired characteristics, which means characteristics when they are acquired by any individual in one's lifetime, they could be inherited by the offspring. So this is how changes come, and it is how those changes, when gradually accumulate over the generation, new species evolve. So according to him, individuals who in their lifetime develop characteristics which were helpful to survival would pass those characteristics to the future generation, and this passage of acquired characteristics, this passage of successful physical traits, it will transform an individual species, it will transform the physical makeup of a species. And the examples that was given by Lamarck, it was that long neck of giraffe was the result of successive generation of giraffes stretching their necks to reach the high leaves. So those stretch muscles, they when gradually put to stress for a long amount of time, those characteristics would be acquired by an individual, and then those the same trait which were acquired by an individual, it will be transmitted to the offspring, to the upcoming generation, and those generation they will born with those long neck. This was the formal, you could say informal or unempirical trial by one of the evolutionary to make sense of evolution, to make sense of changing species. Well, Lamarck and later biologists, they failed to produce evidence to support the hypothesis, but it still formed the earlier bedrock of evolutionary biology. Then in 19th century, some thinkers they beginning to accept the idea of evolution, such as George Cuvier. He was the leading opponent of evolution, and his theory of catastrophism, It stated that a quick series of catastrophes was all that accounted for changes in the earth. Then comes James Hutton. So he questioned catastrophism, and then comes Charles Lyon in the Principle of Geology, and his concept of uniformitarianism. It suggested that Earth is constantly being shaped and reshaped by natural forces that have operated over a long stretch of time. And Lyell had also discussed the formation of geological strata and paleontology, and he used fossilized fauna to define different geological epochs. Then came Charles Darwin, and at first he rejected the notion that each species was fixed in its creation. Then both Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace, both of them, they came to the idea of natural selection, evolution by natural selection, and in 1858, both of them, Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace, they presented their theory of natural selection. And in 1859, famous book, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection by Charles Darwin, it was published. And yeah, his conclusion, it outraised those who believed in biblical account of creation on divine origin theory and apex role of human. But then there are some critics still, there exists some proponents of divine theory who do not believe in evolution, and such people will keep appearing on this screen of world. Then 1871, when The Descent of Man was published, because of his reputation, because of his criticism, he avoided stating it that humans were descended from non-human form, but implication of his theory was clear. Then the better answer is that we and monkeys and apes, we all of us, we are descended from a common ancestor who lived long ago, and this was the time when his ideas, his theories were being criticized. It was the 19th century. But in 21st century, we all know that all of the life forms that exist on this earth, all of them can be traced to last universal common ancestor, and the earliest of which its lineage, it could be traced to 3.7 billion years ago. And the gist of Darwinism, it is that natural selection was the process through which physical and genetic form of common ancestor, it diverged to become both monkeys and apes. Then let's talk about principle of natural selection. So natural selection is the main process that increases the frequency of adaptive traits through time. Before proceeding on to the explanation of natural selection, let me clarify the implication of this gist of Darwinism, which says that natural selection was the process through which the common ancestor it diverged. So at first it was the divergence of common ancestor, and this divergence, it was acted upon by natural selection. So let's look at both these theories. So let's assume common ancestor was some microcellular organism, some microorganism, and the constituent of both physical and genetic constituent of microorganism, it was it was carried in the form of DNA. So the common ancestor, it also possessed a DNA. Then it says that the common ancestor, it was diverged to many forms of plants and animals. Well, if if I take the statement at face value of what Darwin Darwin and his supporter says, so according to him, the common ancestor, it gave rise to monkeys, apes, and humans. But I am talking about last universal common ancestor, that is um, currently in a scientific circle, and this last universal common ancestor, it is ancestor of all living beings, so whether it is plant or animal species. So first question is, why was there a need for the common ancestor, whether it is Darwinian common ancestor um, that gradually gave way to humans and apes, or it is the last universal common ancestor that gradually developed into all life forms. Whichever it is, the first question comes into mind is, why was there a need for any common ancestor to diverge into such a confusing and perplexing tree of life? Why wasn't it sufficient? Why wasn't it um, okay to have the same form, or to exist with the same form that was given to it? Why was the common ancestor, it needed to turn itself into or transform itself into such forms? The first question is the natural selection. So when natural selection comes here, the operator, it is the nature or environment. So when seen this way, the geological processes, we know that geological processes are dynamic, or perpetual. So these processes are, they are not static. Geological processes such as volcanism, second convective currents, the motions of stars and planets and all the celestial bodies, and other processes. I'm going to club all those processes into transformative processes such as um, climate, formation of soil, all abiotic cycles. So all these processes, they can be in short clubbed into either environment or nature as an operator. So here, any ancestor or any species, it will be operated by nature, or it will be tested by nature. So nature, this argument, this statement, it sounds philosophical or metaphysical, and it can be both, or it can be scientific. It just had to stand the scrutiny, and yes, it does. But still, I am going with this such philosophical or metaphysical statement so that you can understand it clearly. So nature acts on us. Nature acts on any species. So and the operator nature uh, it is not a devilish thing. It is acting because it itself is dynamic, and its dynamism, it is the very foundation of the universe, which and the dynamism of universe is because of the way all the matter exploded, the way all the matter and energy expelled and is still traveling in all the dimensions. So universe, from its expansion, it was very tiny dot. So this was the level of compression. All the matter that you see in the whole universe, all that matter, it was compressed to unimaginable pressure and temperature. And when this matter, it got expelled in the form of an explosion known as Big Bang. So this explosion, it sent away, it expelled the matter in all possible dimensions, and we don't know how many dimensions are there. So this matter which got expelled in all the possible directions, it was like a gradual unfolding of a roll of cloth or of fabric. So a fabric roll, when it is unfolded, this is how the universe is unfolding itself. It's like a fabric, and that's why I said there are many dimensions and many of which we do not know right now. But the curvature of space, it is in form of a fabric. So this gradual unfolding of fabric, um, which in philosophically it means we are floating. We are floating in a world. We are floating without any podium or without any base beneath our feet. And every such star, every galaxy, every supercluster, every black hole, all of them, they are floating. And this floating, it is it is being done by their motions. So as long as anybody is in motion, it will keep floating. So that's why we see everything is revolving around something, such as earth, it is revolving around sun, it is revolving around Milky Way galaxy. Milky Way, it is revolving around Virgo cluster, it is revolving around a supercluster. The supercluster, it is revolving around the universe. So everything is revolving. So and this orbital motion, this keeps them floating, this keeps them in motion. So when everything is dynamic, so how can life form be static? So because of this dynamism of the universe itself, the earthly processes, they are also dynamic. They are not constant. So just an example. So when earth formed from a nebula, it was very hot. But in 21st century, in 2024, we we don't see it of earth as a fireball in its initial phases of development. So from 4.5 billion years ago to 2024, this nebula, it has transformed itself from a fireball to a habitable planet. So the outer structure, it may seem static, in which there are houses, there are giant buildings, there They are mountains, they are valleys, they are plateaus, cross. So such processes, such geological processes, they are in dynamic form. And because of this dynamic nature, it is always in motion. And when nature is in motion, it will keep changing. So the gist of everything is that nature keeps changing. And when nature keeps changing, everything that is dependent on it, they need to adapt. And this adaptation, which leads to changes. Since you may have a set of qualities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and suddenly say that carbon dioxide level, which has already exceeded the permissible level, they have already reached 450, and maybe they sooner or later they will breach this 500 mark or reach 600 ppm. And in such a scenario, when the carbon dioxide level reach such a proportion, they are going to eat away the space that is available for other gases, because the gases composition, it needs to stay at 100%, and this is how any closed system works. So if out of that 100%, if the proportion of one constituent is increasing, it will lead to decrease in proportion of the contribution of the other product, the other constituent. So let's say it's 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 300 ppm carbon dioxide, and then come argon, neon, all such gases, water vapor, methane, etc. And now if the proportion of carbon dioxide, it reaches its sustainable limit, and it doubles itself, 600 ppm from 300 ppm, then this extra 300 ppm, it needs to find its way by eating away the composition of any of the present constituent. So it may eat away the nitrogen, it may eat away the oxygen, and we don't know what is going to happen when such threshold is reached. So let's say it may onset a global winter. Now you are some species that have a set of characteristics, such as you have dark skin, then your stature it is leaner, then you live in tropical countries, and your diet it mostly composed of fats. Let's say you have these many traits. Now by the onset of global winter, your dark skin it will not be much of help. Then your lean stature, it will be a disadvantageous characteristic, disadvantageous trait, since winter, when they prefer chubby or high fat organisms. So leaner organisms, they are going to suffer, since during winter it is the extra epidermal and subcutaneous fat. So it's epidermal and subcutaneous. It means you need to have high fat in your body. So high fat organisms, they will be preferred. So anybody, let's say a B person, in his set of characteristics, he is a person, he is a chubby person. Now his characteristic it will be preferred, it will be selected in such global winter, and leaner individual, they need to adjust them, they need to adapt. And if this global winter, it is prolonged by 2 or 3 centuries, in that situation, this leaner individual, he is not going to have any reproductive success, since if he has a lean body, um, the winter, the cold temperature, they will act against his body. He will not be able to store much fat, and because of lack of fat storage, his body is not going to much tolerate cold for much long. And in that case, his body, he may suffer from many such ailments and inflammations, or his reproductive success, he will not find any good mate for this. Or even if he find a mate, his traits will not be selected. It is because leaner trait will not be preferred in global winter. Then if he is in tropical area, but because of global winter, tropical people who are not accustomed to, who are not acclimatized to cold temperature or severe cold temperature, say around -4 or -5 degrees centigrade, people from tropical country, they have never seen anything close to 5 degrees centigrade. So to absorb a difference of 10 degrees centigrade of colder temperature, they are going to suffer a lot. So it's a whole lot of tropical people that are going to suffer. And still, if the same individual, if it is dietary habits include eating lot of fats, now this trait will be selected. This is how natural selection works. Nature is dynamic, it will keep changing. So the individual or species that are dependent on nature, they need to be on their toes. They need to adapt themselves, and it is in their adaptation that their advantageous traits, they are selected. And people who have such traits, they will have more reproductive success, since their because of adaptive traits, they will be able to live on such atmospheres, such changing environment, and if they are able to live well, they are going to have more offspring. And if they are going to more offspring and they are well in themselves, they are going to ensure the survival of their family. This is how evolution give rise to species. Now let's talk about principle of natural selection. So it is the main process that increases the frequency of adaptive traits. So operation of natural selection involves three conditions. First is variation. So every species is composed of a great variety of individuals. Let's take same example of global winter and tropical condition. And every individual who has some basic knowledge of science, they know that both of these concepts, global winter and tropical inhabitants, both the concept, they are antagonistic, they are opposite. Because if uh, you know about the geological processes, 0 degree, it is the equator. 23 degree half north, this is known as Tropic of Cancer, and 23 degree half south, this is known as Tropic of Capricorn. And the area between both the lines from 23 3.5 degree north to south. This whole area, this is known as tropical area. And since this area, it has been highlighted, so there might be some speciality in it, which is this is sun, and you know the curvature of earth, it is tilted. Earth is tilted on its axis. So, and because of this tilt, and since because of rolling of the universal fabric, everything is in motion. So earth is identified by two motions. The first is rotation and second is revolution. So first is earth rotates on its own axis, and second, earth revolve around the sun. Because of this rotation, it gave the diurnal variations. It means day and night because of rotation. So somewhere on the earth, on some part of earth it is day, on some part of earth it is night, because not all the area are equally facing the sun at the same time. And the revolution, it gave rise to seasons. The seasons of summer, winter, rain, and many intermediate seasons such as spring and autumn. Now, the diurnal and seasonal variations have been accounted in, and both of them are caused by the motion, and motion is necessary. The sun itself is revolving. Now, thing is, by now you might have known this, that despite which area is facing the sun at any time, you might have noticed that this central area on the face of Earth, it is always facing the sun, and it is always closer to the sun. And sun is our star. It gives us light, and because of that light, everything you see on the earth, all forms of life, we we are grateful to sun for its energy, because of which all the processes that are happening. If sun is not there, if such energy and heat is not there, the whole universe will be a universal heat, will be living in a universal winter, and no life form, no organism can sustain, no organisms of the form which exist on earth or anywhere, they will not be existing in their present form if the earth, the universe itself will be living under universal winter. So it is the stars in every galaxy that keeps the show on. So coming to the point, so this middle area, it is always facing the sun, and because of which, it this tropical area, it receives 365 days, or at least 350 days of heat, 350 days of sunshine. And you might compare it with the sunshine that is received by polar areas and subtropical areas. So since sun dry all the processes, all the photochemical, biological reactions, all the chemical reactions, the sun, it onset rains, sun, it dry winds, it drives all the photochemical reactions, it drives photosynthesis, that is the basis of life form here on earth. So all these processes that will be in their rapid motion in the tropical areas, and it will also be, this area will be moderate in temperature, because heat is there all the time. So this moderation in temperature is also reflected in their cultural life. And second, the differences between the temperature, that is both diurnal and seasonal temperature, that is seen by tropical people, it varies a lot from subtropical and polar people. All in all, the diurnal and seasonal variations are very less. So you can stay in a cotton shirt the whole time of year. That's the situation in a tropical area. And now just revert the situation, and I'm talking about global winter because of anthropogenic activities, because of global warming. So global winter and the tropical lifestyle, when seen in together, all both the facets, they are going to come to a screeching halt at the sudden mention of winter in tropical areas. And I have told you why, because the people who are living in there, they have acclimatized to very less diurnal and seasonal temperature. They have acclimatized to heat. They can tolerate heat. They can tolerate excess humidity, up to humidity in the range of 90%. But winter, it is not their domain. If winter sets in, let's say there are four people or four category of people who are living in the tropical area, and the genetic makeup of all the individual species that exist in the area, it is not similar. We have number of characteristics, and we all are full of such variations. And this variation, time and again, I am going to tell you, I'm going to highlight this thing, that nature has been acting on us, and this was the reason because of which the first ancestor, the common ancestor to monkeys and apes and humans, and the last universal common ancestor that exists 3.7 billion years ago, both of them had to diverge. And their divergence was necessity so that they keep up with the changing nature. So diversity of genetic makeup is everywhere in all species. It is such that some genetic traits or some adaptive traits will be favored and some will not. And those which are favored will be seen in open light, and those which are not favored will still be there. It's not that tropical country it is full of only leaner and people with toned muscle and tall people, and people with only dark skins. All type of people will be there. This is how genetic variations or the natural selection works. So let's say A is a people with a dark skin, but B is a people one of tropical man who is with not dark but lighter skin. C a lighter skin, and D is person with a mixed skin tone. Now other trait: A is leaner, B is fat, C is leaner, D is fat. Now other characteristic: A is tall, B is short, C is tall, and D is short. Now the dietary composition. At first, he has a high protein diet. The second one, because of lighter skin tone and his culture, he has high fat diet. Third will be also high fat, and this mixed origin, it has intermediate dietary pattern, intermediate protein and fat both. Now this is the situation of people and individual which exist in a society, and this is the variation that stays in them. We will talk about it later when we talk about genes and alleles. But right now, this is the situation. The tropical area, they are composed by four such people, and all of them have some differences. And now when global winter sets in, the first, the person with dark skin, it will not be much help in global scenario, in winter scenario, since white skin will be preferred, or lighter skin will be preferred in winter conditions. Then about lean body, which will not be preferred, which will not be much of a cultural or biological adaptation, since a leaner body will lose heat easily. So heat conservation will not be there, and winters prefer a person can which can conserve heat. All such processes that conserve and maintain or store heat will be of help. That's why you see all polar flora and fauna, especially the animal, you will see that they are furry. They have a lot of hairs on their body, and they are bulky in size. And both of them, it protects their body from losing out heat to the atmosphere or heat to the surrounding. So leaner body which will lose heat very easily, this leaner mass, it will be preferred in tropical area. A high fat person in tropical area will be uncomfortable all the time, will not be selected against, since mm, high any person with high fat content, he will store more heat in a situation when the heat is oppressing. So in oppressive heat condition, a high fat person is genetically disposed to conserve more heat. So the atmosphere itself is sizzling, and his genetic makeup, his genes, they are going to accumulate more heat, and it will be lot uncomfortable for him to adapt to such a situation. But a high fat or a fatty person, he is going to adapt to winter easily, because his fat, it will help him in the survival. And if his skin tone is light, he has higher fat content, and if his stature is short and his diet is also high fat, this will be the ideal candidate for a global winter. And this person, the bee, he is going to have more offspring than any other person. And this is the trait will be selected in him. And this is how natural selection will provide avenue for speciation of, or mm, you can say, emergence of new species. Suppose this global winter, it goes on, it drags on for millions of years, then all the other variants, all the unhelpful and maladaptive variants, they will be wiped out, since they will not adapt to the particular atmosphere, the particular natural conditions, and their genetic makeup, it will also be not much of help, and sooner or later they are going to suffer from one or the other physical ailments, and which will decrease their survival capacity. Now let's talk about C. He is of light shade but leaner, so he will be the second contender. Then he is also tall, so his reproductive capacity, his surviving capacity is also decreasing. But because of his genetic disposition to high fat content, he is going to survive somehow. And if he makes other cultural adjustment, he can come up with working up, or he may come up with other variants of uh, or more survive. He will survive with more offspring. Then D, his skin tone is intermediate. Then he is fat, he is short, and he is of intermediate type. This is a balancing selection candidate. So this happens generally that nature it always favor people with the people in the intermediate zone, or people, average qualities, average categories are always favored against the extremes. This is the basis of balancing selection. So this will be the ideal candidate of global winter. But if suddenly, because of such changing dynamic of world, if global winter fades away and it gives way to light, this person, he will be or she will be the ideal candidate for all kind of weather, because the skin tone, the fat, the dietary composition, the genetic composition, all are of a intermediate zone. So this candidate in all seasons and this in the global winter, they are likely to provide more offspring. They are likely to ensure their survival, the survival of their families, and they are going to pass their time in best possible manner. So this is what survival means, and this will how they will be selected by the nature. So now every species, they have many such varieties. This is the first principle, and out of such species, or out of such individuals, some are better adapted to their environment, and this existence of variety is important, because if variety is not there, then natural selection will not operate. So in the same case, if all four of them, if are if all of them are of same genetic and phenotypical disposition, if all of them are similar in their genotypes and phenotype, then without any variation, natural selection will not work. So either all of them they pass the test, or all of them die. The variation dynamic will not be considered here. So without variation, one kind of characteristic could not be favored over another. Then second principle necessary for natural selection is the heritability, that if an individual, if he is selected against the prevailing environmental condition, his traits, they need to be inherited. So there need to be some mechanism in which the selected traits, they get transmitted. So reproduction is there, by which offspring of all animals and life forms, whether it is sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction, but this mechanism, it permits the heritability or permits the passage of inherited traits. And third principle is differential reproduction, because better adapted individuals generally produce more offspring than the poorly adapted individual. The frequency of adapted traits gradually increase in subsequent generations. So this is the whole basis of natural selection. The selection will be considered only if some are favored and some are not. So all the three principles of natural selection, first, there need to be variations in a population. Second, inheritance, and third, differential reproduction. All the three principles in conjunction, they give rise to better traits. The differential reproduction, in the sense that all the four composition in a particular population. So let's say B and D both are individuals that are adaptive, and A and D are not adaptive. So the nature, if it acts on you, see, adaptive traits will be favored. It is because take the same situation of a tropical country. I'm talking about one such situation in which you can really manage it up. So tropical country, there are two individuals, dark skin and leaner, then light skin and fat. Now, which one of the individual is going to survive better? So obviously in tropical country, dark skin and leaner people, they are going to survive better because it is their genetic disposition in terms of their phenotype, means how their body is made up of, the external appearance. So because of their dark skin, they are going to absorb more heat, and this melanin, it also protect against various vector-borne diseases, since in tropical country the emergence of life forms, all forms of life from micro to macro, it is in rapid pace, a kind of rapid fire round, since the source of heat is constantly available to them. So such microorganism, they always need a host on which they could feed, and vector-borne disease are always in news in the tropical countries. So this dark skin, it helps them first from UV radiation and then vector-borne diseases. And because of their leaner mass, they are going to lose heat very easily. So if excess heat it is lost by their leaner body by precipitation, by sweating, they are going to feel comfortable. They are going to operate on daily basis in a more efficient way. So this is about efficiency. Now, a light skin and fat. So light skin people, because of overexposure of sunlight, the UV radiation, it might act against the skin tone. So there will be some damage to the epidermis, or it may lead to carcinoma, some cancer, skin cancer, because of overexposure to UV radiation. So first disadvantage. And then because of fatty stature, his body will not be able to expel the excess heat. So this sweating or precipitation mechanism, it will not be of much help. And fatty individuals are likely to conserve more heat. They're likely to absorb more heat. So in a situation which requires you to shed extra heat, shed uh, or to dispel away any amount of heat that is storing inside, the physical appearance or the physical trait of this person is working in the opposite. His body will conserve more heat. So sooner or later, his internal organ, they are going to, uh, in literally some, going to feel the heat. They are going to suffer some damages. And in both situations, this individual, he will clearly have more offspring, since he is working with the efficiency. So with the efficiency comes the source of mates, and with this he will also efficiency he will also develop some survival techniques such as earning money, his profession, his job. It will be done with precision and um, with ease, with comfort. So with comfort, he's able to ensure his survival and ensure survival of his family. He will ensure survival of his children, and this will be a case of differential reproduction, in which his his own life and that of his children has passed the test, has crossed the threshold, they are living well, living with ease, and this person, even if he is able to have some offspring, the genetic traits will be inherited by his offspring as well, and he and his family, they will have difficulty in surviving or difficulty in living with comfort and ease. So this is what differential reproduction means. So certain traits that are adaptive or advantageous, that they result in greater reproductive success in particular environment. Then the particular environment is very important. So even though a species may become adapted to a particular environment over time, we cannot say that one species adapted to an environment is better than any species that adapted to different environment. So let's reverse the situation here, which is the role reversal here. Dark skin, leaner, and here light skin and fat stature. Now, if this person, say this person is from Jamaica, this person is sent to live in Norway, and this person, let's say he's from uh, let's say he's from Switzerland or any Scandinavian country, and he is sent to live in Kenya. Now the role has been reversed. So this Jamaican, he may be the king of survival in tropical areas, but when sent in the polar area, in tundra area, he is he is at the mercy of his neighbors. He is at the mercy of nature here. And in the same way, this Swiss guy, he may be the Swiss, he may be the Swiss knife of the alpine beauty, but when sent in Kenya, he is helpless here. So this is what has been highlighted in the text, that a person, he may be adjusted to a particular area, he may be able to survive better in a particular environment, but when the role is reversed, when Jamaican man, if he is sent to polar areas, or a Swiss guy is sent to Kenya, their reproductive success or their adaptation, it will not be of much help. So it means humans are clearly less adapted than fish to living underwater. We may think that we are better than any other than other animals, but we are less adapted than most of the animals. Here examples are given that we are less adapted than fish for living underwater. We are less adapted than bats for catching flying insects, and then raccoons for living in suburban garbage. Yes, and although the theory of natural selection suggests that disadvantageous or maladaptive traits will generally decline in frequency or even disappear eventually, it does not necessarily follow that all such traits will do so. Because not all the changes that are seen are possible. Catastrophism is not possible. Yes, the nature keep changing, but it is not that nature will drastically change itself into a situation which is not conducive for any such any forms of life. Then it will be an extinction event, such as the 5 extinction we have seen on this earth. So those were the time when the nature, it changes to such a degree that most of the life forms, sometimes even 95% of life forms, they disappeared. So this is one of event, but generally nature will not drastically change in a way that all forms, all the uh, traits, they will become useless. And it also means that some traits are linked to other that might have advantages that outweigh the disadvantages. So it's not that the natural selection thing, it is such a calculative thing. If nature is dynamic, life is dynamic as well. And it's not that the we are a species of a few, say, 4 or 5 particular traits. We have lot of traits, and sometimes a trait which is uh, which is not linked to particular situation, but it may come of help. It may become necessary, or it may emerge as a winner in such a situation. So see the example here. Choking may be maladaptive for any animal because it is lethal. But yet, all vertebrates are capable of choking. It is because their digestive and respiratory system it cross in throat. So the passage of digestion and respiration is the same. The epiglottis in our throat, and this trait it is a genetic legacy, probably from the time when the respiration system it develops from tissue in the digestive system of ancestral organisms. So this legacy is still there of choking, and this is if you forget choking, the legacy of having both respiratory and digestive system in one tube or in one particular organism or one organ. So this legacy it has been in existence for a long time. All vertebrates they have the same process. So here this this particular thing, choking, it may be disadvantageous, but since it is there, this um, union of respiratory and digestive processes is there in all the organisms. So one trait may be disadvantageous, but overall this whole structure it outweighs all the disadvantage, because we cannot have two mouths, or we cannot have two orifices for both respiratory and digestion or digestive processes. If seen in if expressed in simple terms, we are made up of a lot of biological and cultural traits. All the life forms, even the birds, even the simple microorganisms, we are composed of many such traits. And with changing time, a few traits will be selected, and the rest they either stay neutral or they may be maladaptive. If the genetic composition of any particular species it is composed of most of the traits which are maladaptive, then it is definitely going to hit on the reproductive success. But it doesn't happen on such a scale. Usually what happens that if some out of 100, or on a scale of 100, if we have 30 traits which are adaptive and 20 which are maladaptive, then still there are 50 such traits which are neutral, and these 30 traits they will be favored in a particular environment, and these will be disfavored. But these 50 they will come to our help, they will come to our rescue with changing time. We may not know that somewhere in the future, in the upcoming generation, these adaptive traits they may turn into maladaptive, and these 50, they may emerge something around 15 or 20 such traits that will be selected by the nature. And so this is only a game of chance. We do not have any say in it. But yes, all in all, we have a lot many traits. Some will be selected, some will be disfavored, but they are still a large pool which stays neutral, and they may come to our rescue. And then the forms of the species that possess the more adaptive trait will be more frequent. So this is what differential reproduction means. So here is an explanation of theory of natural selection, which explained why giraffe became long neck. So originally the necks of giraffe varied in length, as happened with any population. There are different kinds of individuals. So the the ancestors of modern giraffe, they were also of different stature, different height, different length, and during the period when food was scarce. So this was how nature changed. Food became scarce. So those giraffe that possessed longer necks, and they could reach higher trees, and it was those who could reach higher trees and chew the leaves, they would be better, they were better able to survive and suckle their offspring. The same situation, a population of giraffe was there, in which there were variation inside the first principle on which natural selection acts. So this ancestral population, let's say A was long neck, B was short neck, D was intermediate, and C was intermediate, and D was long neck. And now this is usually the composition of every species. All species contain the variations. And now comes the role of nature. So here, because of scarcity of food, natural selection came into play. Now here, this one, since situation here is that when food grain, or when the tree diversity, it is in less supply, it is scarce. So to survive, every giraffe needed to eat. So here the differential, or the success condition, was something like this. So in order to survive, all four of them, they needed to eat eat from the available supply. And since the shorter one, they will be eaten away soon, since these are the trees that are in ready supply, and they are readily accessible. So the accessible one will be eaten away soon, leaving the space for three tall trees. So when this scarcity is there, such small trees, or such less tall trees, shorter trees, they will be eaten away, they will be cleared away, and this will lead to more scarcity, since ground level plants, they will decline in the diversity and decline in number. And now the competition between the four of them to survive. The shorter one, he is going to die first, because of a short neck, he is not able to reach the upper heights. And in that case, he will not be able to survive. If he does not survive, his lineage will extinct there. And now the three. So these taller ones, they are definitely will be selected, since because of their long necks, they will be able to chew from these tall trees, and if they chew, they will feed. It will give them reproductive edge. They will reproduce more, and since they have this trait of long neck, their offspring, they will also have longer necks, and they will also able to feed themselves. So their lineage, it is secure. This is what reproductive success means, and this is how natural selection acts. And then the intermediate selection. So this is the person which has more height than the shorter ones, but not as tall as the taller ones. So if somehow he could manage, if somehow there are trees which the lower foliage can be accessible and lower foliage can be eaten, so this trait will be selected. And since I have already said that balancing selection says the people of average, or person or organisms of average traits, they are favored over the extremes. So maybe if he has this certain standard to at least reach up to this height, he will survive. But the taller ones, they are definitely going to have an edge. So this is how the the modern giraffe, all of them, most of them, they have long necks, because they were the offspring of those earlier giraffes who were able to survive in the times of scarcity. So because of heredity, the offspring of long necked giraffe are likely to have long necks, and the shorter necks, they will diminish in number, and the number of longer necks, it will increase. So the resultant population of giraffe will have variation in length, but on an average, the longer neck, they will be favored. Then natural selection does not account for all the variation in frequency. So, and it does not account for variation in frequency of natural traits. So as I've said, some traits will be favored, and there will be some which will be neutral. And the changes in frequency of neutral trait may result from random processes that affect gene frequency, such as genetic drift and gene flow, which we will see in the next chapter.